nothing I do now will bring my eldest daughter back.
Our next guest is a senior officer in one of the largest banks in the world. After being diagnosed with autism and ADHD, Jonathan Scott Lee became a neurodiversity ambassador, paving the way for an inclusive corporate landscape. But just last year, Jonathan's life took a completely unexpected turn. His daughter, Caitlyn, who was also autistic, tragically took her own life at just 16 years old. Now he's on a mission to raise awareness about the increased risk of suicide for autistic people. We are incredibly lucky to have Jonathan here today to share his and Caitlyn's story. Just a heads up, today's conversation touches on some difficult topics, including suicide. If you or anyone you know is in need of support, please call Samaritans on 116 123 or go to samaritans.org. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on the Hidden 20%. This, for so many different reasons, is a really important episode, and I'm delighted to meet you face to face. I'm honored that you want to come on the Hidden 20%. We share a lot in common. We're both in our 40s. We both have 3 daughters. We're both autistic. We're both ADHD. And we both want better and to make a change. And so I'm really grateful that you're here. Can you tell me why you wanted to come on the Hidden 20%?
Well, I'm honored to be here, Ben. I've been watching this podcast since it started, but the reality is that the only reason I'm here today is because my daughter has died. There's nothing remarkable about me. And you're going to try and argue with me already, but it's true. For 5 years already, I've been trying to raise awareness of the benefits of neurodiversity across the corporate world. So it was with much irony that my very own daughter died last year. But if there's a story I can share, and if in any way I can support what you do here, I'm happy to simply speak to you.
Thank you. Tell me about neurodiversity in the corporate world.
It's been an interesting journey for me. I've been working with what we call the corporate world for 2 decades, but I've always struggled throughout that, actually. I originally wanted to be a vet at school, but thankfully I got entire rejections from that idea. So I fell into clearing and ended up studying computer science, and eventually found a job after everyone else had rejected me as a hacker, of all things. It's quite different from being a vet.
Yeah.
But I was good with computers. So I've been fortunate enough to be in that corporate world, in that environment where I've been able to use my technology skills to get things done. But it's not been without a struggle either. It was only in 2013 that I was first diagnosed with ADHD. And
where were you in 2013? Where did that diagnosis happen?
That was the first year I was expatriated from the UK to my first mission in Singapore. Okay. And what's interesting about that is back in those days, you get an expat package and you get free psychiatry with that.
Okay.
So that's when I wanted to sort of squeeze those benefits. So I started seeing a psychiatrist just because of this expatriation benefit. And I went away surprised that I'd been given a couple of packets of Ritalin and this diagnosis of ADHD, which turned out to just really, really help. It really helped me to understand myself. It was only after I moved to Hong Kong a couple of years later in 2020 that I had to see a new psychiatrist, because you obviously have to see a new one if you want additional medication. And this second psychiatrist sort of gave a second opinion and also mentioned that I probably have autism as well.
What did you know prior to being diagnosed ADHD about ADHD?
Well, it's your typical naughty boys jumping off tables at schools, isn't it? You have to remember, my parents moved from Asia to the United Kingdom, and of all places, Birmingham. So there I am, born in Birmingham, growing up as a random Chinese dude in the middle of Brummyland, going to a pretty good, but also a bit rough state school. So my identity was wrapped up in just trying to figure out who I was. And I thought most of it was about me as a Chinese-looking kid in this environment.
In terms of you feeling different.
Exactly. So I think as you traverse life, you realize that there's just different things that happen to you that you don't always recognize when you're in the moment.
And then prior to your autism diagnosis, what did you know around autism and your views on that?
What I would have known is Rain Man, and I was by far from being a genius that could count cards and make a ton of money. But even as someone who at that point had been confirmed as ADHD, I did not know much about autism or other neurodiversities, or even the extent of comorbidities.
Yeah, what word that
between
is.
those. Yeah, it's just termed wonderfully, isn't it? But it must be really difficult for kids out there, or a ton of people out across our nation or across the world who are still learning about what their place is in the world. I mean, you'd have had the same, right? As you founded Seedlip, no one told you that you're good at what you're doing and rubbish at other stuff. You just finding your way.
And it sounds like with the way that your brain works, you, regardless of how big the company is that you work for, computers, tech, cyber, which I know, you're incredibly proficient at, that's the environment that you found where you can flourish.
But what's remarkable is I wouldn't expect to sit here, because most of your guests have come from the creative fields, right? Or entrepreneurs, or they've found their own path in life. I happen to find mine in the corporate world and do pretty well at it and get paid well for it. But I think everyone's on their own journey.
Yeah, and I've had lots of people reach out to me since starting the podcast from the world of cybersecurity.
Oh, really?
Yeah. People involved in cybersecurity recruitment, and people sharing their story that they are neurodivergent and that they think neurodivergence within the world of cybersecurity over indexes. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you layer on top of that an industry which I'm in, banking, which is all about trust, right? We're trusted to look after people's money and make sure that everything's safe. But cybersecurity takes it to another level, because not only do you have to understand about architecture, hardware, transport layer, network layer, software, UI, even human psychology. It's quite a broad range of skills, and it takes a really quirky sort of person to be intense enough to want to learn it all.
How long have you worked in the corporate sector?
Yeah, it's 20 plus years.
20 plus years. So that has been your career, and
that's been the only life I've known.
Yeah. So you found the way to make that work for you, pre-diagnosis, post-diagnosis,
and throughout. Everything in between.
Yes.
And I think that's worth drawing out, because neurodiversity isn't just the misfits and creatives. I'm pretty sure that there are quite a substantial number in, how do I say, normal jobs in the corporate world, which are thriving or are not thriving, but they don't always realize it. But I think increasingly through podcasts such as this and awareness, people are thinking, oh, that could be me. Yeah. And they don't have to be a celebrity or a movie star. They could just be regular people.
You're an exact example of, as there will be many out there, of people thriving in the corporate world, in big companies, in global companies, with massive teams, in senior roles, with loads of complexity.
Yeah.
It's banking, right? Super regulated, complex,
governed,
rules governed.
Yeah,
as you said, people trusting you with their money. Like, there's a big responsibility there.
So I've been asked to run operations in a different country. So it involves a lot of people, the human factor. I run a huge team of almost 500 people now.
Wow.
And actually, I feel the responsibility of that. I want to do it well, but I also recognize I'm learning, and working with me or working for me is probably a bit harder than a typical person.
But I bet you if I was on your team and being neurodivergent and having you as my boss, my God, I'd feel like the luckiest man on the planet.
You might, but actually, ironically, I wonder whether I'm a little less forgiving of that. So don't get me wrong, I'd be still pretty difficult to be with. I'm on a journey of learning what other people can do and trying to fit into this world in a positive way. But I also wonder, there have been so many neurodiverse corporate leaders as well. Like Steve Jobs is a great example of someone who was a visionary and was able to have people around him, such as Tim Cook, to execute on that vision. It's really easy as neurodiverse individuals to think that we can rule the world, but we can't do that alone. We have to partner with everyone.
Yeah, it needs the 100%. It doesn't work if it's 1.6 billion neurodivergent people against the world. I think it would be foolish to sort of go, we need neurodivergent companies and we need neurotypical companies, and that's how we just need to separate, and then we can create the environments that work. Like, the world can't work like that.
We're all different. So the question I think that's more pertinent is, how can we value difference, however we think or however we look?
Yeah, and how can we not be afraid by what we're not, or by something that is different from maybe how we are or see the world? Because when you boil it right down, that is literally all we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, is fear and lack of understanding or lack of information about something that we don't know about.
Yeah.
Or that is not us, or not what we see in the mirror. So I mentioned at the beginning that we're both fathers. Tell me about your daughters.
Yeah, I've got 3 beautiful daughters. Whenever someone asks me that question, in the past year, I've had to hesitate because I don't know whether to use the past tense or present tense. As many of you will know, I lost my eldest daughter last year. She was 16, Caitlyn. Yeah, as you can imagine, that has quite a large impact on siblings. We often think in terms of parents or other loved ones, but imagine you're a kid and you have to try to make sense of the world in addition to something that's pretty non-ordinary. How old are your kids?
11, 4.5. The half is very important to River, obviously, because she's closer to 5 than she is to 4. She told me yesterday, actually, when I picked her up from school, that she's decided she wants to be a scientist. So I'm all for that. And I mean, I can't even begin to imagine, Jonathan, what losing a child means. I struggle at the best of times with empathy anyway. And so to imagine losing one of them, I can't begin to kind of imagine what the last year has been like for you.
It's interesting because I'm extremely rational and logical. I know that I can't turn back time.
Mm-hmm.
We can only live forward, and that nothing I do now will bring my eldest daughter back. She's well and truly gone. Nor do I necessarily need to find blame or reason for it either. Again, that's just a very rational thing. So when people ask me how I'm feeling, I don't know how to describe it. I feel very peaceful, and I ascribe that to my faith as a Christian.
If you would, Jonathan, take me back to that day when you found out about Caitlyn.
I think at key events in one's life, you sort of know precisely where you were, and the smells and the senses and the weather. It's remarkable. So for me, I was just waking up in Hong Kong at the time, surrounded by boxes because I was packing up my entire apartment in Hong Kong to move to Canada at the time. So eventually answered the phone, and it was the headmistress saying, look, Caitlyn's gone missing. We found her and she's died. And it took a while to sink in. So I remember having to say the words, can I just confirm that my eldest daughter, Caitlyn Scott Lee, has died? And the headmistress was really lovely, really gentle, and just confirmed. So surrounded by packing boxes, I just continued processing things and very logically thinking, I need to call my brother, let him know. I need to call my parents. And within 24 or 48 hours, had the Daily Mail and some of the tabloids calling, asking for comment. And at that point, we were just not ready. I want you to imagine this with one of your kids. You're going on a funeral website, and do you choose a casket? What type do you choose? Are you going to go for burial or cremation? Can you then start to write a eulogy? Who do you want to invite to the funeral? Where is it going to be held? What's the waiting list between burial and cremation? Those are all the practical things that I was going through and thinking of. And if you pause for a moment, it's heartbreaking, actually. And if you layer on top of that all the police, the incessant media attention as well, it gets difficult, but somehow you get through it.
Why do you think the press took such an interest in Caitlyn's story?
It's taken me a year to step back and wonder why there's been a lot of interest. And I think it's down to a couple of things. She had autism. It was a suicide at one of England's most prestigious boarding schools. And that she had already, of her own volition, reached out to the NHS for help as a 16-year-old. I've been flooded with messages from well-wishers or people who have their story. And it typically touches one of those strings.
And the stats that, thanks to you, I now know around the risks associated with autism and suicide.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that 1 in 3 autistic people have suicidal ideation. I didn't even realize that 1 in 4 have attempted suicide. And when you think about the numbers, it's quite high, actually. I work in finance, and so I'm dealing with numbers and probabilities all the time. But only in recent years have the autism community started to sit up and realize that there does seem to be a connection between the two that needs more research and requires maybe some interventions.
Look, I sit here as one of those people who has attempted suicide, a number of times. And there's so much within Caitlyn's story that I personally relate to, from the planning, the diary, all of those aspects I really relate to, and not telling people and not sharing. And I know Caitlyn did ask for help, and she did seek advice, and yet still this tragedy happened.
Yeah.
When was Caitlyn diagnosed, and how did that kind of come about?
She was actually only diagnosed a year before she took her life. So it would be 2 years ago from now. And she was well on that journey of understanding herself. But there are comorbidities as well, whether it be depression or anxiety or other things going on in someone's life. When it was something that you considered, how long ago was that for you?
So I was 21.
Yeah. And what was going through your mind?
2 things were going through my mind. One, I don't want to be here. And number 2, I don't know if I'm meant to be alive. And that, the second one sounds a little bit strange, but
yeah,
I effectively engineered attempts to end my life that on paper could end my life. And it would always be without people's knowledge, and it would always be on my own. And so it would always be, and I reflect being autistic on this now, all of the conditions were set and there so that I could end my life.
Yeah.
I took those risks and I took the gamble, and I did that 5 times, and I did it using different methods. And each time I ended up in intensive care, but each time I lived. And the last time was enough. And it was enough proof that I was meant to be alive. I feel pretty disconnected from it. You talking about how you've dealt with Caitlyn's death, I really relate to. I know what you mean when you talk about the practicalities, and when you talk and
because they need to be done, don't they?
Exactly, and that's not
Regardless,
because I've lost a child. That's just because I understand how rationally,
But it doesn't mean that people like us are unemotional or that we don't care. There's something about the way we think that makes us really good under pressure, actually.
Are you really good in a crisis?
Yeah. When there are things burning down, I'm the one to hold the fort and direct who needs to do what. But, I'll say I'm glad that you failed several times, Ben. If it weren't for that, your 3 beautiful daughters wouldn't be here. Sam would be missing out.
Yeah.
And Seedlip. Yeah.
Seedlip wouldn't exist.
We need non-alcoholic drinks.
Yeah, Seedlip wouldn't exist.
But at those heats of those moments, you are rationalizing stuff. And I think part of the problem with an autistic mind is that we think we know everything. And often we do. So in our area of specialism, you probably shouldn't question us. So for me, cybersecurity, technology, know it really well. But we can take it beyond a certain point where we think we know the right answers to do X, Y, Z. And maybe it's not the right thing to do. I mentioned my faith, but I think my faith's helped me a little bit in that regard because it's rounded me off a bit. I like to think I've got a little bit more humility now to recognize that I might not have the answer for everything. And I think that helps me to be a bit more balanced in how I approach life and what I do and don't do.
How did you react when Caitlyn was diagnosed? And how did Caitlyn react to being diagnosed autistic?
At that time, she was well into boarding school and well into being a teenager. That contact was minimal, but not because she didn't love, but because she was having so much fun with her friends and enjoying school. But I think there was an unspoken connection between us in that we'd always been very close, daddy-daughter, but also the fact that we're now both confirmed to have autism. We had that in common. And it was something to be celebrated, not disappointed about.
This is a strange question to ask, but did you feel, and do you think Caitlyn felt like you could both just be yourselves with each other?
Yeah. There were many moments where we'd just walk and not need to say anything. We'd have our cameras taking pictures of stuff. And I know she was like that with many of her friends as well. Not necessarily needing to talk, but just to do things with.
What do you miss most about Caitlyn, Jonathan?
I've been asked this question a lot. But it occurs to me that it's not that I think or miss things about Caitlyn, but I recognize when other people do stuff that I can no longer do. So I might see someone walking down the high street, like a father holding a daughter's hand, and I'll just recognize it as that something I can't do with Caitlyn anymore. Or I'll see an advert but with a father playing with a daughter or putting a Lego set together. And I'll just catch myself realizing that I can't do that anymore. I'd started writing Father of the Bride speech like a long time ago because I'm quite well prepared.
That's very well prepared.
And I had plans of showcasing embarrassing photos of Caitlyn with whoever she would have married. So it was a very peculiar feeling taking that draft and re-architecting it into a eulogy. Yeah. Maybe there's a disordered there's a disordered nature about it. I can't quite put my finger on it.
And so we're sitting here today in the UK. What can you just describe why? I know you're not here for me. So why are you in the UK?
It just happened to be that pretty much a year to the date that Caitlyn passed away. But also the inquest into Caitlyn happened a week later as well. And from what I understand, an inquest occurs when there's an unexpected death. But what's been unusual is that it's taken quite a long time to have the inquest held, actually. And it just concluded this week.
And why did it take a long time?
I think the circumstances of Caitlyn's death were a little bit unusual. The discovery of new evidence led to the NHS needing to be involved and added in as an interested party by the coroner. And then the discovery of Caitlyn's diary itself being quite a unique piece of documentation that needed a lot of time to review.
So then can you just walk me through, Jonathan, what you then learned this sort of sequence of events had been?
Unbeknownst to me at the time, Caitlyn had booked to see a GP, to see a doctor for anxiety and depression. She had a lot of self-awareness of what she was going through. And what I hadn't quite realized is that as a 16-year-old in the UK, you can do that without your parents knowing. So I have much admiration for Caitlyn's ability to just know that and do that. She was seen by a GP who referred her to CAMS, which is the Child and Adolescent Healthcare Service, was given a follow-up appointment in May 2023. But unfortunately, she died in April 2023. And in between having the first triage appointment and then the follow-up, she died.
Do you think that anything could have been different there?
It's always hard to retrospectively speculate because the answer would always be yes. But perhaps a more prudent answer would factor in that it might not always be easy to recognize these risks. What we do know is that we sit here today and we can live forward, trying to do the best we can with people who are still here.
And the next person, the next 16-year-old or 17-year-old or 18-year-old, if medical professionals are aware, it's highly likely that if they are aware, there is, you would hope, a better chance of the risks of suicide being minimized and intervention of
much earlier,
some kind happening. And so what happens now?
Well, it's too early to say. I speak to you just less than 24 hours after that inquest concludes. There are many well-wishers. As we take time to ponder and think of next steps, I think there are many, many really good experts who probably need help. And I'm happy to support and help if I can.
How do we stop this happening again?
I think of the world in terms of probabilities. That's what makes sense to me as a scientist. So I'm not convinced that we can ever get to zero likelihood. But I like to think that we could do certain things to make it more difficult to happen, or to reduce the probability of things like this happening again. People like us are already trying to build a world that will be more welcoming for people who think differently. But actually, we're trying to build a world that will be welcoming for everyone, full stop, so that our kids can thrive and continue.
If Caitlyn was sat where I am now and you could talk to her again, what would you say to her?
I don't think I'd say anything. I'd just push these microphones out of the way and just hold her. There need not be any words. You know, when you go home tonight, you can rush home and do that. You can hug your kids and not say a word. read them a story. In the morning, you can plait their hair, because I can't do any of that now. But you can.
And that's something to cherish.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we ask people, Jonathan, if they can bring something of significance to the hidden 20%. What have you brought us?
I brought this ring, which looks like a signet ring, but it's actually a mourning ring. And there's a story behind this. The ring has an inverted image of a bird on it. Caitlyn very much enjoyed her bird watching. On the shoulders of the ring are 2 tattoos that were found on Caitlyn after she died. A picture of a note and also a camera, 2 of the hobbies that she was so passionate about. Her name's inscribed on the inside, and there's some locks of her hair inside as well. And I was wandering the streets of London shortly after she died, and I just randomly walked into a jeweler's who had heard about Caitlyn and recognized me from some of the photos. And they were so lovely. They offered to design the ring and put it together. And it's been such a meaningful gift.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben.
Caitlyn was, from what I understand, a pretty incredible musician.
She loved music, and not just listening, but she would pick up instruments and want to learn. She was learning the trumpet with a friend, and she was playing the drums. She had played the violin, viola, piano, and I'm sure other instruments, and clarinet as well. So after Caitlyn passed away, I was able to get hold of her laptop, and being in cybersecurity, I got in somehow. And was looking through as much as I could, the files, I was interested in what she was working on and what she was thinking. And I found this musical composition that she was working on, actually. And it turned out to be a concerto for string instruments. But it wasn't finished. But I had it printed off, and some friends of ours put a small group of string instruments together and recorded it. And it was a beautifully haunting melody. And that's another special thing that she leaves behind. But it is unfinished as well. So as you listen to this piece, it abruptly ends. But perhaps that's what makes it so much more meaningful. It's something that I'll always remember Caitlyn by.
Well, we're going to end our episode by hearing that. And yeah, I know this episode is going to hit home. It's going to strike a chord, and maybe is the beginning of some much needed change.
Well, anything that I can do to support the great work that you're already doing, let me know.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Ben.